Using any three prescribed texts show that some characters in society are victims of circumstances. Candidates are reminded that this question requires you to show how characters suffer or get punished without being the cause of their suffering or their punishment. In The Old Man and the Sea, Santiago is a victim of ill luck as he goes for 84 days without a catch. Nevertheless, he does not give up as he goes to sea every day. This situation causes Manolin's parents to withdraw his only true companion from fishing with him, leaving him lonely. His situation makes him to be referred to as a salao, and this increases his poverty and loneliness. He has no food. He has to live on charity from Manolin and Martin and gets mockery from the other fishermen. Lucky enough, 85 is a lucky number for him, and this leads him to catch the biggest fish ever caught by a single fisherman, highlighting love, poverty, superstition, and determination. Santiago goes to fish far into the sea and spends 3 days at sea and catches a marlin. He kills it, but he becomes a victim of circumstance because he does not take the fish home whole, highlighting triumph in defeat. The blood of the marlin attracts sharks that come after its meat, removing heavy chunks in each bite. Although Santiago fights off the sharks, he loses all the meat and brings home only the skeleton and loses most of his fishing equipment, highlighting triumph in defeat, endurance, bravery, faith, and determination. Santiago feels very lonely, and his loneliness is aggravated by his ill luck. This situation causes Manolin's parents to withdraw his only true companion from fishing with him because they consider him a salao, leaving him very lonely, highlighting superstition. His loneliness is also amplified by the death of his wife, whose picture is wrapped in a clean shirt and put on the shelf. Images of his wife increases loneliness, and when he goes to sea, he feels the strong desire to speak to someone. He also misses Manolin's presence, highlighting the importance of human companionship. In Twilight of Misty Foliage, Infinite's family is a victim of circumstance because of their father's greed, betrayal, and quest for money. He has been contacted by foreign troops to capture a dangerous family, the Gangbo family, which had killed their soldiers mercilessly and taken away all their ammunitions. The family had been hidden in the caves of Fembo of Ndaka under the protection of the king, and he had taken the contract to fish them out. He attempts to enter the cave of Ndaka, but the bees swing into action, chasing him away. The bees decide to carry out revenge, and they fly to Infinite's compound. He is a wealthy man with many animals, catch crops, and many children. The bees attack Phineas' compound, starting with the animals, the children, and Aviate, his wife. The children are badly hurt, and they focus on the young road beggar who had impregnated one of their daughters and had bragged about the fact that nothing could happen to him if he does not take responsibility. The bees sting him until he faints, and they abandon him thinking he is dead. We also come to understand that although the people take the children to the hospital and they recover later on, he loses all his animals, and he and his family go back to their village in poverty and rags, losing all that he has had. Miraculously, All the family members are discharged. Nevertheless, his son Rodbega decides to embrace priesthood not out of conviction, but out of gratitude to God for saving his life, and that of his family members highlighting gratitude. Next, the people of Sambis are victims of the manipulation, powerful and corrupt nature of Sajem elites. Reverend Rodbega carefully plans the subjugation and domination of Sambis by Sajem through marginalization and marginalizing them in all forms. The people of Sambis are not given employment in the church. They are deliberately made to fail exams and the seat of the administrative unit is taken away from them by the administration in collaboration with some of the Sajim elites all over the country. It is clear that money had changed hands between the two groups, highlighting corruption, marginalization, social injustices, and discrimination. Cardinal Mpochueng is a victim of Reverend Rodbega's scheming and jealousy. There is conflict between the cardinal and the Reverend because the former's presence has exposed most of his weaknesses. He has opened the eyes of the Sambis people who now rebel against Reverend Rodbega, boycott his sermons, and refuse to write the doctrinal exams organized by the church. Reverend Rodbega pays Dracula, Rambo, and Rasputin to eliminate Cardinal Mpochueng so that he can run the diocese the way he deems necessary. He orders them to kill him and throw his body in the sea to be eaten by fish so that he should not be given a proper burial. The hoodlums give Reverend Rodbega the assurance that they have carried out similar jobs successfully, indicating that they are the best assassins. Despite His Eminence's previous hospitality towards them, they abduct him from the bishop's house in Liba. They cut off his scrotum and testicles, leaving him thinking that he is dead in excruciating pain. By faith, he survives to forgive them and their master, highlighting evil in the society and goodness. The people of Wanetemu are victims of exploitation of Don Castro, and Ntumbo is a victim of colonial exploitation. The Europeans had come to Africa with bullying tactics, divide and rule policy. When they discovered that the riches of the continent, there was a mad rush for colonization. But the injustices that followed later on and still continues up till date is unbearable. Don Castro from Pongland appropriates the resources of the Republic of Wanetemu for himself, his family, and Pongland. The owners of the land and the resources are chased away from their ancestral lands without compensation and live impoverished lives. His children had all the fictitious corporation and lord over qualified children from Wanetemu. Ntombo writes to the president pointing out the exploitation of the land and the people, but his entire family is wiped out by state-sponsored assassins. No one carries any investigation to find out the culprits, highlighting exploitation, evil in the society, and man's inhumanity to man. In unanswered cries, Olabisi is a victim of an outdated tradition like many of the young girls. She gets a slap from her mother because they differ in ideas about female circumcision. She escapes to the bush. She is ambushed by the Bondo women. She manages to escape to Freetown after giving money to Pa Amado. She also has to face the ordeal of going to court, where she is humiliated because Cesar reveals that she has been sexually active at an early age. She is covered in shame, just like when Makalai scrutinizes her private part and finds out that she is no longer a virgin. Lucky enough, the court's verdict goes in her favor, highlighting change in mentality and determination. The young girls in Sierra Leone are all victims of an old age tradition to please the Bondo spirits and gods. These young girls are forced to endure pain against their will, despite the health hazard involved in the process. It raises the problem of choice and decision making. If at all a young girl has to be circumcised, it should be her own. It should be out of her own free will. Some of the young girls die from excessive bleeding, infection, trauma, complications at birth, and even death. Dr. Asiatu's daughter is a victim of circumstance of a tradition that puts the lives of young girls at risk and because of ignorance and superstition. Dr. Asiatu's daughter is dying of HIV and AIDS, which she had contracted through female genital mutilation, and she uses her daughter's case to crusade and fight against the abolishment or the abolition of such a practice that puts the lives of young girls at risk. Her case is just one of the many which brings to light those that have not been reported, highlighting change of mentality. Oya is a victim of circumstance, of emotional stress that she is subjected to because of Ade Jones's infidelity. There is conflict between Oya and Ade Jones resulting from the latter's chronic infidelity, and he sleeps with many women, including Yamide, whom he claims to be an ordinary friend. Above all, Oya has been taking care of the expenses of the house because Ade Jones does not have a permanent job. Oya wants him to be committed in their relationship, and she threatens to quit him forever, and this pushes him to propose marriage, and they get married later on at the end of the novel, highlighting love. In the swamp dwellers, the people in the south are victims of the weather that is not kind to them. Climate change is an issue because of the abnormal amount of water in the swamp due to heavy rains. The constant rain swells up the water in the swamp and makes the land unreliable for the production of crops in the community. Igwezu has cultivated his crops, but the crops have been destroyed by the flood because of excess water, leaving him with nothing. The people in the north are also victims of climatic hazards. The beggar comes from Bukanji community in the north, which is also affected by less rainfall causing drought. The desertic condition is caused by less forest in the region, thereby rendering cultivable land barren and arid. Climatic change has also caused the displacement of people and the propagation of diseases. The beggar situation is aggravated by the locusts that had devastated the crops planted. Some people decide to go to the city to beg for alms. The beggar comes down south in search of land to cultivate and plant crops on. He wants to reclaim the land from the swamp to render it profitable to the community, but Makuri considers such suggestion to be sacrilegious. The young generation is a victim of circumstance as they continue to flee the village because of poverty. The younger generation also leaves the village and their homes due to unreliable nature of the weather and lack of economic empowerment. Awucheke and Igwezu leave the village in search of greener pasture, but when the latter returns to the village, he is more frustrated because of the weather has not been kind to his crops. The destruction of the crops by flood pushes him to attack the Kadie before he flees from the village, never to return. In addition, Igwezu is a victim of his own twin brother's greed and ingratitude towards family. Awuchike has become very rich and beyond imagination in the city. He has made a lot of wealth, and it has corrupted his soul to the point that he has severed all ties with his parents and his twin brother. No word is heard about him for many years. Worst of all, he demands Igwezu to use his harvest, the harvest of his crop, as collateral for a loan that he gives him. At the end, Igwezu loses all the money and returns to the village, poor to meet his farm and crops that have been destroyed by floods. The swamp dwellers are victims of the Kadie's exploitation, hypocrisy, and greed. The Kadie is fat as detected by the beggar, who discerns from his voice that he is well fed and taken care of than most of the other villagers. He steals the offerings which the people offer to the serpent and consumes it, leaving the serpent deity unsatisfied. The catastrophe on the crops might be attributed to the dissatisfaction of the serpent of the swamp. The betrayal of function by the Kadiye makes Igwezu to become critical of the Kadiye. Igwezu is bitter because he has offered the demanded sacrifice, yet he had not had the protection that he had sought for. The Kadiye lives comfortably on the sacrificial offerings that the people give to the serpent. Igwezu questions the Kadiye why he is very fat and what had happened to the sacrifices that he had offered to the serpent. He malhandles the Kadiye, leaving him frightened and panting for such an affront to expose his greedy and corrupt nature. The people of the swamp are also victims of circumstances for the exploitative nature of the white companies that exploit petrol in the Niger Delta area. They do not take care of the environment, and there are frequent oil spills. Coupled with the fact that the flood destroys crops, we are made to understand that the crops are also damaged by the oil spills. Lastly, Makuri and Alu are victims of Awuchike's neglect and greed. Awuchike is ungrateful as he abandons his parents for a decade while in the city without a word, whereas they are worried about his welfare. Alu concludes that he is dead. In addition, he has made money, yet he does not take care of his aging parents in the village. Worst of all, he dupes his own twin brother, dispossesses him of his wife and inheritance, leaving him frustrated. In Anthology to Poetry, in If We Must Die, blacks are victims of oppression from whites because of greed and superiority complex. The poet denounces oppression of one race over the other. The speaker tells the listeners that if they should die, it should not be a cowardly death. It is important for them to fight back against what is clearly a suggestion of oppression to which blacks have been subjected to for a long time. Their oppressors mock and laugh at them all the time. The speaker suggests that if they should die a noble death of bravery so that their blood will not be shed in vain. Even their oppressors will honor them in death if it comes through bravery. Those who will kill or want to kill them will have no other choice but to respect them for their courage and bravery. Although they are outnumbered in unity, they are going to show their bravery and determination. For all the oppression that they have been subjected to, he hopes that they will give a deadly blow to their enemy and opposition. They will face their enemies like men and face death in the face in the open grave. They will not allow themselves to be slaughtered by the enemy, but they will die fighting to liberate themselves from the shackles of oppression. In If, the speaker warns the listener that he will be a victim of those who do not like him, and even his friends, and those whose livelihood depend on him. The speaker urges the listener to keep calm when everything goes the wrong way and the blame is apportioned to him. He tells the listener not to doubt himself or allow his self-esteem to be downplayed in the same way that he must accept criticism from others. The speaker tells the listener that he will be a victim of hate, but he should not give room for hatred to be accommodated or dwell in their hearts. His enemies will deform or twist the truth that he had spoken, but he must stay calm. The listener's enemies will do this in order to brainwash gullible and naive individuals to have a negative impression about him. He continues that the listener may be hurt by his enemies and even close friends, or those who depend on him for their livelihoods. The same people will cause him pain, but he must learn to forgive and separate himself from them. In cruel megalomaniacal leaders, the people or masses are victims of their leaders who are oppressive, incompetent, and sadist. The leaders are drunk with power and they feel too powerful that they can do anything and go unpunished. They do not listen or entertain opposing voices. And those who look the other way are considered as dissenters or opposition. They are forced to flee their countries and face humiliating living conditions as refugees. Worst of all, these leaders deliberately keep their compatriots poor, and this is a crime against humanity. The speaker is confident that the leaders will pay one day for the suffering that they have imposed on their compatriots. They are only concerned with staying in power, and they will do everything to keep it. They terrorize their people because of greed. They are also sadists, and they derive pleasure in inflicting pain on their people because they lack human feelings. Nevertheless, there is payback time, and they will answer to their crimes against humanity. These actions highlight leadership, poor leadership, abuse of power, poverty, injustice, suffering, greed, and man's inhumanity to fellow man. The leaders do this deliberately to inflict pain and make the people live in fear. Thank you for watching.